We
What would the world be if we allow Dave's delusions? Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. It's the 2nd of July, 2025, and I hope you enjoyed your Canada Day weekend. It was turned out different than I do expected. So, Niagara Parks are looking at being concerned, and they're not saying there's immediate action going to happen, but they're talking about the fact that pedestrians have been targeting motorists. Sorry, motorists have been targeting pedestrians around the world, and people have been going crazy by driving into crowds. And of course, we have a big crowd here down on the Queen Victoria Park on any average tourist day.
Well, evidently, Bob Gale brought this up.
Yeah.
And he had said, well, look what's happening. And of course, the article points out the one in Germany, the one in BC, and the one in the States there that recently.
Yeah. And the one on January 1st, a pickup truck driver avoided security barriers and barreled down Bourbon Street to kill 15 people and injure 30 others. Right? Wow.
Yeah, it seems that if you can't get a gun,
well, it's a lot easier to get a car, right?
Yeah, anybody can get a car. Anybody can rent one, and of course it can be used as a weapon, just as airplanes were used as weapons during 9/11.
Yeah.
And most of these guys seem to be suicidal too, which doesn't help.
I was going to say most of these incidents seem to be by people who otherwise might well be carrying a Molotov cocktail or a jacket bomb.
Yeah, it really falls into the mass shooting thing too. It's like it's a relative of the mass shooting. Of course, mass shootings are a lot easier because you can do a lot of damage in a crowded place very quickly with a gun. But you can equally take people that unexpected people and run through, like the one in Germany. They were set up for that. They thought they were set up to protect against something like that. But there was one weak link in the chain, pardon me, and the guy got in there and he started mowing down people with his vehicle. Is that the?
And the thing is, they've also been talking about the prospect here. The commission has been enhancing public safety throughout Queen Victoria Park to make it more walkable and cycle friendly. They're looking at evolving the whole thing over the next 4 years. One of the topics that has been discussed is removing cars from that area. I think that would be a sad thing because, for me, it's like I often go for a drive, and I do it all times a year, any time of year, I just go for a drive down the parkway.
Yeah, it's a nice way to get your mind off of the BS that's going on in it, and just kind of look at pleasant things to look at and so on. And the park is a wonderful place for that.
Yeah.
My issue here
I don't mind that the roads are being narrowed, etc. That doesn't bother me.
Well, my issue is how are they going to prevent someone from a car from doing a hell of a lot of damage?
Yeah.
When you've got a lot of people up against the stone fence there, where are they going to escape to if somebody runs down that?
What worries me about this is that Bob Gale's visions, and the same with David Adams, the chief executive officer, who've been talking about this. That they're talking about the need for public safety, and they're absolutely right. And the trouble is, it's like I've a number of times when I've gone down there, thought to myself, what if a person just had a heart attack or something, and the car went out of control?
That's a possibility too.
Right.
That's very possible.
And I said it that way because of the fact that that's an innocent situation, right? Yes. Nobody's deliberately doing anything. But as soon as you kind of think about the person who has a heart attack and dies at the wheel and kills people on the way, you also then have to be concerned about the person who does it deliberately.
I'm more concerned about the one that does deliberately, obviously, because the guy that's had the heart attack down in Queen Victoria Park will not be driving that fast anyway because of the speed limits and stuff. So, yeah,
no, but if he has to have a heart attack tragically the gas pedal, that could be the worst.
Well, tragically, like if somebody had a health problem and lost control of their car, they could hit a few people, but somebody who is aiming to do it and planning to do it, that's another big issue.
Yes, it is.
No one's going to stop coming from Niagara Falls if somebody's had a heart attack, lost control of their car, and killed a person or two.
Yeah,
that's just a tragic incident.
That's just a tragic accident. Yeah.
But if Niagara Falls gets hit with a murderer or a mass murderer, or somebody intent on hurting and killing as many people as possible for whatever weirdo rim or reasons going through their head. I mean, the one in BC was a Filipino festival, and I think it was another Filipino man that did it.
Yeah.
Whatever was going through his head. The guy that killed women on, I think it was in Yonge Street. You remember a little while ago? He took his van and he started killing women that he saw with his car, and he was finally pulled over. And
well, and then there was we've seen it around the world, places like there was a demonstration in Manchester that got attacked by a person on a van. I don't remember what the demonstration was about, but I do remember that they killed 5 or 6 people in Manchester, and same thing. The police thought they cordoned it off.
Yeah, the problem is what's going through what is enraging them, and if you were to think, well, it's terrorism, it could be like the guy at Tops who in his own deluded mind shot 10 people and killed them because he was against the replacement theory, which was just dumb, and he targeted a place in Buffalo far away from his own home. And so what kind of insanity drove that man to rage? What kind of insanity drove the man to rage to kill women on Yonge Street?
Yeah, that's something I think we need to get to the heart of, because, we need to figure out, you see, you wind the clock back 50 years, even 100 years. Nobody did any school shootings in the USA. Nobody just randomly gunned down anybody in the USA, and certainly nobody did any drive their truck deliberately into a crowd.
What is the source of the rage?
Yeah.
What is that continuous thing? Now, sometimes these people call themselves Islamic, radicalized by Islamic text on whatever, like the guy that went to Ottawa and killed that young man who was guarding from Hamilton, a young soldier who was like on guard, but he had a fake gun, so he couldn't defend himself. What is it? Of course, there are a lot of Islamic individuals getting radicalized, and they'll do something like that. So you can kind of understand the brainwashing that goes on there. But what is it with all the other ones? The ones that do not have ideological bent of any kind.
Yeah, and half of them seem to be, half the ones we hear about don't seem to have any political views, or, you know, they're not radical about anything. They just went mental one day.
Well, the one that was in Toronto, he just hated women.
Yeah.
Mark Lepine, who killed 14 women in Montreal with a gun, he did it because he didn't like women. Well,
I don't approve of it, but I understand that there's a motive behind it.
Well, it's not, no one could approve of it.
Of course,
let's face it.
Yeah.
But what is driving the rage?
Yeah.
You know,
and why rage? Why are we getting to a situation whereby we're in a rage situation?
We find rage happening over and over and over in our society. Road rage, people just freaking out that demonstrations are no longer demonstrations. Often they're areas of rage against the machine, rage against society. The rage part of it is what is peculiar to me. It is that is the thing that is getting under people's skin and turning them into mass murderers.
Because again, you talked about rage against the machine. Well, the interesting thing is that you know, it's like, I suppose back in the 80s, we saw there was a kind of case of rage against the machine. A lot of people, for whatever their viewpoints, they would say, you know, they'd say down, you know, there's been periods in the time whereby we've had this, you know, down with the system. Happened in the 60s. It happened in the 80s.
Yeah, there was righteous rage, though. It was rage against war, rage against killing, rage against bigotry, rage, that kind of thing.
But again, kind of rage. Do that through public display, public demonstrations, and you know, basically, whether you agreed or disagreed with the demonstration, you kind of, if you agreed, maybe you'd join in. If you disagreed, you just ignore them.
There was a lot less damage when. That's my remembrance. Like you would have huge demonstrations, anti-war demonstrations, and then you would, and people would be very, very angry. But I don't remember them smashing things up like what happened in the George Floyd.
Actually, Mike Cushman has said being a crossing guard is scary. And probably because what happens is he waves his stop thing, and people don't stop.
They'll accelerate to get past them.
Yeah.
I did that job, Mike. I did that job many, many years ago. I know what you're talking about.
Rage against poverty created by government is the underlying issues. I would say that's what. You know, rage against poverty. Yeah, okay, that's fairly true. I think, you know, you have $100,000 a year job and have never and never won a house, got a house in Canada. Yeah.
Yes, that causes a certain amount of rage, but it's not the kind of rage that's going to make you blow up a bank that didn't give you a mortgage.
Well, you see again. You see, I would say that if I went to the bank and the bank didn't give me a mortgage, I might pull my accounts from that bank.
Yeah, but you wouldn't do it out of rage.
I might badmouth them on Facebook.
Yeah, but you wouldn't. The rage is the issue here.
Yeah,
you would be angry. You would be very angry, but you wouldn't. Your rage wouldn't get you to the point to blow up the bank. And that's the real issue here. More and more of that is happening, where people seem to be entitled to go into rage.
Yeah.
The young man that shot up Tops, and killed a pile of black peoples because he was enraged by the replacement theory, which didn't even apply to black people. You see what I mean? It didn't even apply to black people because black people's populations were declining as well. So how is it he got enraged on a falsified type of thing, and then which motivated him to shoot a bunch of people? Yeah. What enraged the person at the Lulu festival in BC to run over other Filipinos? Why? What enraged him? What is it that you could see getting really angry?
But I also
lamp.
Yeah.
You know, what is it that would enrage you to murder people you don't even know?
I also get the fact that the Niagara Parks Commission have got to think about getting about the safety of those that are going to see the falls. Now, the other question about this, of course, is that it's the northbound lanes on the parkway that are actually those that are most likely to provide access to killing individuals.
Yeah, it's going to be. Well, of course, they're going to have to study it. I can't really see them being able to protect that much. They're going to have a constant police presence down there, and they're going to have to be trained to spot something like that.
Yeah.
You know, luckily, there's nobody that can get up ahead of speed on the road itself during the summertime because it goes too slow. But it's easy to get off road there. It's easy to get off road and zoom down the the stone fence along the gorge where people collect in large numbers.
Yeah, you
see a guy racing through the park there. What's going to stop them?
Yeah, you get a truck, which a four-wheel drive truck, you can get over those curbs relatively easily, right? The traditional curb, the traditional bump up type curb, you can get over relatively easy. Even with a normal saloon car, you can, but with a four-wheel drive, much easier, right?
Yeah, it's going to be nearly impossible to protect against something like that. And let's face it, 90%. If we have one disaster like that, one enraged individual that takes a vehicle and starts killing people, that's not gonna that's a disaster for the tourist industry.
Yeah.
And when I mean that, it might reduce the amount of tourists coming. That means less people getting jobs, less people being employed. I don't care about big hotels or anything like that, except for the fact that they employ people.
Yeah. One of the things about it is that 90% of everybody who is pulling over to the side in that northbound, 99.99999% of everybody who's pulling over to the side in that northbound lane is usually trying to drop somebody off.
Yeah. Well, or a sense of entitlement. I'll just park here for 5, 10, 15 minutes while I get up, look at the falls.
Yeah. Yeah. The sense of entitlement.
And they put on their flashers as if that's going to help.
Yeah. Yeah. While their family get out, go to the car park, just park it up. I know they're expensive, but just do it, right?
Yeah, seriously. Yeah.
And I've often been worried. I'm glad that Bob Gale and Chief Executive David Adams from Niagara Parks are concerned about this because, in fact, it is a big concern. We do have to think about the safety of said people, and and I'm glad that they're evolving a safety plan.
Yeah. So anyway, so what else we got?
Yeah. Okay. Moving on.
I'd just like to point out too right now that Mike has sent us a bunch of stuff, and we should address it tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's showing due diligence in what he does. keeping an eye on environmental factors here in Niagara, and I think we should address it once again.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I read your note. And I'd forgotten to mention it. Is all. Yeah. Absolutely. All right. Moving on. The Ford CEO, Jim Farley, is basically concerned that young people don't want to work. And he's been looking around and thinking about how the hell are you going to resolve this? And he basically was saying that he was looking at the history books, particularly the history books of the Ford Motor Company. And at one point, Henry Ford, when he was looking up about, he was having problems in the early days in 1914 about how to get people to work for the factory, and then he came up with this bright idea that he would double the average, the wage for the average 8-hour workday.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't. Oh, let's see if I can try to open this article. There we go. Yeah, so basically, the Ford CEO takes a look back in history and sees that back in 1914, Henry Ford decides to double the wage of the average worker. When the average worker back in those days was about $2 a day, that was a good job. He puts it up to $5 a day, and that was kind of unheard of. And that in that way, he wanted to establish employee loyalty, and also the idea was, could they afford my car? Now, Henry Ford, in his very beginnings, was an average dude. He was an average, regular guy. He understood the plight of the average person because he was one. Basically, he was very, very down to earth. He just happened to be an inventor and a person with uncommon energy and vision. I mean, we can get into all the dumb stuff that Henry Ford does, particularly his insane anti-Semitism. But other than that, there are many other factors that Henry Ford was very, very good with, particularly in his early days when he was still idealistic.
Yeah.
He changed a little bit later on when he refused to have unions establish himself in his company, and he brought in a bunch of thugs. Well, he got kind of sort of sullied because he saw a lot of thievery and abuse among his employees. But other than that, he felt that he should change that. Now, this current CEO is looking at the same thing. How do I make my employees happier? But he's mostly talking about the part-time employees here that get paid very little, and their work hours are not that pleasant. And the people that work there would rather work anywhere else if they could work anywhere else. That's a bad thing if you're an employee. When your employees would rather work anywhere else than where they are, that's wrong. That just doesn't. It's not good for you. I can't even open the article though. Anyway,
Hey,
What happened?
power went out.
Oh, okay.
Blip, and then I've got no internet, and then I'm waiting for the internet to reconnect. So, hey, I think we're still live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry for the interruption, everyone. But the guy Farley, that was CEO, said that older workers who'd been at the company said none of the young people want to work here, Jim. You pay $17 an hour, and they are so stressed. And Farley learned that some of his workers also held jobs at Amazon where they worked for 8 hours before clocking in for a 7-hour Ford shift, sleeping for only 3 or 4 hours. As a result, the company made temporary workers into full-time employees, making them eligible for higher wages, profit-sharing checks, and better health care coverage. The transition was outlined in the 2019 contract negotiations with United. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it takes a full 2 years before they get on as full-time workers. It wasn't easy to do. It was an expense, but I think was a kind of change that needed to for the country. And as Ford's own decision was not altruistic back in 1914, it was to a tragedy to attract stable workforce, as well as provide a stimulus for his own workers to be able to afford Ford products. So that's the kind of metric he used. Can my own workers afford my car, the car they built? And he decided that if he paid them better wages, he'd get a stable workforce, and they then would be able to afford his product, whether or not they'd buy that one or a different car. That was
that's up to the individual. You can't do much about that.
Yeah. And at that time, Ford definitely built the best automobiles for the average person. They were superior to almost any other car.
And probably back in 1914, the vast majority of workers at the Ford factory probably arrived on a bicycle, didn't they?
Probably walked.
Or walked, yeah.
Or took the streetcar or whatever else.
Walked, bus, or bicycle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So 1914, very few people had a car. That's for sure.
And by making it possible that they could buy their own product meant that actually they were probably getting to work on time, but more timeliness, etc., etc.
Yeah, that was
to say that you can't get to work on time if you're going by other methods.
Back in the 70s, my father would take his students tours through GM to show them how GM worked. And when asked by students why GM had modernized, or at least with robots and other things, even way back then, they said, well, the reason is we want to employ more people to buy our cars. That really didn't hold much water for very long. GM and Ford and Chrysler all automated. They were behind the Japanese in doing it, but they just did it anyway, and which reduced the amount of people that were working at the plants, but made a better quality car. So I don't know what Henry Ford would have done back in 1914 if automation was available to him today.
Remember, he was Mr. Automation anyway, because he was the first to put the whole production line into place.
He wasn't the first. He was the one that made it. He
wasn't. Yes, he wasn't. You're correct. He wasn't the first, but he was the one who made it most effective. He bought the parts. He bought the building car to the individual, so that your job was just to put the doors on.
Yeah, he was the one that really made the production line super successful. It had existed earlier in smaller industrial means. Like I think the Colt Gun Company had a kind of standardized sort of like production lines. Somebody would make the cylinder, somebody this, that, and they would make them all the same and all interchangeable. Back in the day when almost just about everything was custom made, that changed things quite a bit. But in any case, so there, it's nice to hear this, but is it propaganda from Ford when people tell you that the young people don't want to work there?
Mike is saying that if you have a job paying Ford wages, you cannot afford a house. What is the sense of working? The dream is lost in Canada.
Yeah,
that's what Mike is actually saying the young people are going through right now. So why would you bother? You know, if you're coming out of school and you're facing the prospect of, you're going to get a job, but the job is a minimum wage job. Why the heck would I bother?
It's a dead end. You have to work. Everybody has to work. Everybody has to make money. So but they're dead end jobs. You know what I mean? You're making minimum wage. You go in there and you're doing your job and you're getting no job. The only thing that brings car manufacturers, the guys on the assembly line, back to General Motors every day is because it's the pay, the benefits, and everything else. Every one of those persons' jobs can be replaced by just about anyone else, and they all know it. So they have the protection of the union, and they go through mundane work that, if you've ever talked to a lot of different GM employees, once they get in there, they're thrilled they're going to get in there. But once they start working, they think to myself, can I do this for the rest of my life? Can I keep putting this cylinder in this thing day after day after day, month after month after month, doing the same job over and over and over again? Can I maintain this my whole life? It's driving me mad. Yeah, and as we found out,
pay may be good, but this drives me mad. Yes.
Yeah, I remember that from one of my old neighbors. He was a Hungarian. He was a painter by trade. He was a good painter. But when he got into GM, it paid a lot more. But he worked on these mindless jobs that was driving him insane. At least as a painter, he could figure out what he had to do, and each different job was different. You go to this house, that house, or whatever else. But the money was irresistible. But his biggest problem was how can I keep my mind in this mindless place? So but the car plants are much different now, and I think that somebody actually looking to the average person and seeing if their employee is happy or content in what they're doing and doesn't feel so stressed out, that may be a big difference. Now, when you give the solution to AI and it says you need to save money, you need to pay them minimum wage, and you may have to make them wait 2 years before they get a full-time job. That's a good way of screening everything and la-di-da. But it takes out the human factor. And I think that's what's being removed many times from our employment, the human factor. Yeah. What does the human being feel like when you give them that kind of a job? What does the human being, what kind of esteem does the human being have?
And he's also talking about some differences between countries. He says you go to Germany and every one of our factory workers as an apprentice starting in junior high school, every one of these jobs has a person behind it for 8 years that is being trained.
Yeah, and their quality workmanship. Can you beat German engineering?
Yeah,
you have to go all the way to Japan to beat to compare with German engineering. And
Germans would say they're better than the Japanese.
Well, I'm sure they would, but but then again, we got to remind them both that they thought they could conquer the world, and they didn't do it back in 1940. So there is limitations to your perfection. So both those societies have within their culture, ingrained in the culture, a sense of discipline and duty.
Yeah.
So and well organized. So that's why they're producing the best cars. That's why they're producing the best technology, and being relatively small countries compared to China and
but
the United States.
Again, there's a study out there by Soto Analytics that is saying U.S. manufacturing jobs in the U.S. have an average of $25 an hour wage, which is about $51,890 per year, falling short of the average American salary of $66,600.
Well, that's because manufacturing can get away with paying less, because that manufacturing job will leave the shores of the United States, just like other things have done of late. So the problem here, of course, is self-esteem, the worker's self-esteem and their happiness. If that worker is not happy, you're not going to get the greatest performance out of them.
Yeah.
It's not as if you're in a culture where there's this kind of sense of duty, but look at what they do in Europe. Like you said, in Germany, they treat them very fair, right? Okay. We can establish that you're not going to go to university. You're not going to go to post-secondary school education. So we're going to get you an apprenticeship in car manufacturing, and you will work at it for 8 years to perfect your skills to be a top-notch worker in this factory. Now you will sustain yourself throughout your life, knowing that you are important to this company. You are an important individual. We have put a lot of time and money into you, and you have graduated, so to speak, from your 8-year program.
Yeah.
And now you're an essential person in this, in our operations. We have respect for you, and your esteem is reasonable. I'm just an average guy with an average average score in high school, and I come out and there is a job for me where I can feel useful and important and make a living.
And the whole point is that the apprenticeship starting at the junior high school level, basically meaning that you're 16, 17, you're starting to learn trades.
Yeah, I'm not so sure it's all trades. It says
no, it's not. But
it sounds like they're an 8-year apprenticeship for an actual person that works in the factory. So it might not be that. What they will do is then sort out who should be in the trades and who should be on the production line.
Probably at the early stages, no distinction between them. They're all learning the same stuff.
Yeah.
At the high school level, right?
Yeah.
So when they're 16, 17, they're starting to learn out of school skills, but they're also got their school experience behind them. So they'll continue to learn the normal school curriculum.
Yeah. So anyway, there is a pathway.
Yeah.
Which is markedly different over here, where you get a chance to get your foot in, but you're going to be working for minimum wage. You're not going to be able to make ends meet. So you're going to have to pick up a second job somewhere along the line. And you're always on tenterhooks because you don't know if you're going to get the job or if you're not, or if there's going to be a layoff or whatever else.
Yeah.
You're left out in the cold. So basically what they're trying to do is remedy that, to establish a stable and unstressed workforce. You might not be able to make them happy, but you sure take a lot of the stress away from them. Yeah. What you do want to do is fill up your factory with young people every year, more young people in it, so that you have 65 to 25 or whatever, 20 to 65 continually moving through the system, so the older ones can teach the younger ones, and et cetera, et cetera. And if you can do that, the other factor I think that the Europeans have over us is they have a member of their union on the board of directors. That is something that we should have here. Our for instance, the CAW or whatever they call it now, Unicor or whatever it is, they should have a member of their union on the board of directors, so that member on the board of directors, somebody they hire a CEO to represent their interests, so that CEO can then come back to the membership and say, now is the time to demand higher wages. Now is the time not to. Now is the time to kind of buckle down because we're in for some, we're going into headwinds. Now is not, and we want this company to survive. So now is not the time to push for wage increases. And that board of directors will also be the person on the board who turns down bonuses for the top flight executives that somehow always get a bonus.
That has always
when everyone else gets a wage decrease.
Yeah, that's always bothered me. The company turns around and says, "Yeah, we've been having a real bad time, and the books show it, but yet we're still going to now pay our our shareholders a nice fat bonus."
Yeah.
There's if it's bad times, it's bad times for everybody, right? Okay. Moving on. New Ontario laws, 1st of July. We talked about these pedal pubs, right? That's been one that's been in the news. They're called quadricycles, designed to transport 12 or more passengers between restaurants, bars, and wineries, and they're basically they're licensed to actually sell liquor now on these. Right? Don't know that I like them as an idea. I personally, I'd never get on one.
I never even heard of them until this article, to tell you the truth. Yeah. I never heard of them. The idea is good to allow to help people go from bar to bar to bar, restaurant to restaurant without having to drive.
And obviously the person,
so it takes that risk away.
The person at the front steering is actually not drinking. And to be very clear on this, right? It's an employee of the bar.
Oh, well, we don't know that for sure.
No, that we do. That's for sure. That's the way these things operate. They're employees.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, okay. That's a good thing, to be able to get people from place to place. I think that's probably in certain areas that'd be pretty good, getting on one of these pedal things and going this bar or that restaurant, it's you avoid taking a car there. It's too far to walk, but do you really want to get on the subway or the bus? So these things are pretty good. I think it'd probably be very good for business, and then people can feel relaxed. You don't have to worry about drinking and driving. You don't have to get a designated driver.
You do have to pedal. You do have to pedal, sir.
Everybody has to pedal?
Everybody has to pedal.
Well, I could pretend to pedal.
Because the whole point is that it's the pedal power that gets you to the new bar.
Okay. Well, I've never seen one, and I can't see doing a whole lot of drinking. I can't see doing a whole lot of drinking while I'm pedaling down. Like, can you?
No, neither can I. I've seen one of these things in Germany. I thought they were crazy at the time. I still think they're crazy, but still.
Well, they're worried about people drinking or something like that. But if you're pedaling, I don't think you're going to be able to throw back a whole lot of booze. No. And who's going to serve it to you anyway?
Yeah.
So I think it's I don't know. What's the next law that we have to worry about?
Ontario Disability Support Payments now accepts Canada Disability Benefit as not being an income. Right? It's not a lot of money, but it used to be considered that the Canada Disability Benefit payments were considered an income. Now they've changed that rule.
As they should.
They should, because it's daft. Right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I imagine Karen Fraser, we could use a lot of her insights here. which she's told us previously on this show how stupid the thing she has to put up with is just stupid.
Some of these things that everybody on ODSP or whatever disability benefit that you get, there just seems to be stupidity in it. Okay, now next one is government's going to be removing 4.3 cents per litre provincial tax to prepare for licensed road vehicles. All right.
Hit me with that again.
They're going to remove 4.3% per litre provincial tax on propane for licensed road vehicles. Propane. Sorry, I missed the propane bit.
I don't know if anyone's ever come across a propane driven truck or car, but I have, and
I've driven one.
Have you?
Yeah.
No, I have. I have for forklifts and things like that. And propane is the means by which scissor lifts and articulated booms, they all run on them. But I mean, like a road vehicle? No, I haven't. Yeah, but I've seen them. I had a coworker that had one, and I saw him, like, when we pulled over for gas, he pulled over for propane.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I used to. Well, actually, Central Taxi used to actually do most of their vehicles were actually propane rather than gas.
Which one was one of the outfits was natural gas?
No. Well, Central Taxi used to do propane.
Okay.
Yeah. And they were actually significantly cheaper, but you have to have a.
Sorry.
That's okay. One thing about propane is it's in a tank. It's a sealed tank. In a tank, it's actually much colder in the tank than gasoline is.
It's not colder when the propane under pressure is released. It therefore releases its energy and becomes cold, because when you put something under pressure, it heats up. But then when it becomes the ambient temperature of everything around it. For instance, if you take a gas and compress it, it heats up. But if you hold that gas in the atmosphere, it will lose that heat. Yeah. But then when you release it, it releases its heat, and the propane tank will become cold because it is that gas is no longer under pressure.
Yeah. Okay, minimum. Next one is minimum wage for gig workers. Starting July 1st, digital platform workers who provide rideshare delivery or courier services will be entitled to a regular wage of $17.20 per hour for active time. So for active time, which is the time between accepting a trip request and completing it.
So it's a gig worker, and they have. And what is different from then and now?
Uber Canada says that for each 2-week pay period, they will compare driver earnings, excluding tips, to guaranteed minimum amounts they'd earn for their active time. If they earn less than the guaranteed minimum, Uber says they're going to top it up. Not sure. I'm not sure how this is going to work. Because in fact, you get paid at a rate of $17.20 per hour for the time that you're physically driving. So if you've got a 10-minute job, you're paid at a rate of $17.20 an hour. But then if you're waiting for 3/4 of an hour for your next job, you get nothing.
Well, I have no experience in that, so. Anyway, anything that assures people to get a fair deal wage-wise I'm good with that. And the next one's expanding nursing practices.
Yeah.
The province will now allow nurse practitioners to order and apply a defibrillator and cardiac pacemaker order to perform electroagulation, complete and sign mandatory blood testing forms. So it's basically speeding up the health process, whereas a lot of countries, nurses quite often have more authority than they do.
Well, nurse practitioners are the top-notch nurses, and they can certify death in many circumstances.
Well, here, yeah. So, and certified death in more circumstances. Yeah, it's just basically expanding
what they can do. Yeah,
what they can do and what they probably are. They're very, very capable of, and probably more.
And in many instances, we talk about the lack of doctors in our community. One of the questions that has been put up has been instead of doctors, we have nurse practitioners.
Well, basically, I had nurses taking care of my surgery after my surgery. I had surgery a umbilical hernia, and my incision became infected. But I was way up north, so there was nurses stations there that took care of it, and they did as good a job as anyone, I would think,
Yeah.
Even though it was infected, they helped that out. Now the next one is
next year's
ticket sales.
When it's coming to Toronto, they're basically making amendments to the Ticket Sales Act, so they partners can sell the tickets outside of Canada and can sell them in foreign currencies.
That's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Justice system changes. That looks a little bit more interesting. Ontario is amending statutory powers procedure. Well, maybe you should talk to this.
Yeah, the SPPA is what governs all tribunals, and it allows tribunal cases to be reassigned if the original adjudicator or panel can't reach a decision or complete a hearing within a reasonable time frame. It's the reaching a decision which has been problematic. I had to wait 8 months for one decision. In fact, I've had two decisions. One which we waited 4 months for, and the other we waited 8 months for. And it's just the length of time taken to do these. That's the problem. And getting a decision is problematic. So if they're looking at speeding up decision-making timelines, that's a good thing.
Well, we've come into that with Kiwanis. For instance, we have the Kiwanis Foundation, which of Canada, which is Canada-wide. That is a registered charity. We're trying to get our own particular club registered as a charity. Yeah. We never thought we had to before, but it would be convenient if we did.
Yeah,
there's a whole lot of hoops you have to jump through.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like seriously, like there's just a bunch of them that we have to jump through to get that status. Meanwhile, all the money we make and distribute are all our charity status. They're all status. And
the worst of this is that probably in order to get, if you paid somebody like Angela to do it, you'd probably end up, in terms of the time taken, because I know she's done, she's done setups for charities before, and it becomes quite expensive because it's about $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 worth of time, dependent upon the amount of red tape one has to jump through.
Yeah, it's very interesting how problematic it is. I guess because they're trying to avoid phony charities. But when you get an outfit like ours that is over 60 years old, or the one at St. Catharines that's I think it's 75 or 80 years old right now. So do you think, like, you know, that I think is a little bit ridiculous. A brand new outfit that says, okay, we're a charity, give us our charity status, you know, like Jimmy Swaggart's or something like that. You can think, okay. And particularly with religious funding and so on like that. You get a lot of, you get a lot of, oh, sorry.
Yeah. Well, the next one's got more serious consequences because potentially it means, and the question's been out there for quite some time. If you're driving an RV, depends upon the size, the kilogram weight limits, etc. You may actually require D licenses, ERF driver's licenses, or other classifications of licenses instead of your normal G license.
Yeah, well, you can see that coming. You know,
it's been a big problem insofar as you've got RV drivers who've got a standard G license who these things are as big as a bus, and yet they've never had the training a bus driver gets.
Yeah, I think probably there's, it kind of makes sense. Like I used to be able to drive a flatback truck if I had my chauffeur's license, which no longer exists. Like, okay, so if you want to drive truck, you got to get yourself. Nowadays, you got to have a D license, you got an air brake license, all this other stuff. Even to drive a bus, you have to have special training.
Yeah. Oh yeah. and that's the way it should be. You know, and the thing is, when I've seen some of these people trying to back up their RVs, I'm like wondering about, where did you get your driving license? We'll put it back in the Cracker Jack box.
Yeah, really.
You know. All right, so it's worrisome when you see some of that, but you know, so I'm not surprised. The new licensing laws are coming in. What's going to happen though with people who've got got foreign, you know, driving, you know, who come to Ontario, who've only got a G license and they're driving an RV?
Well, it's up to the state. If the Ontario government recognizes that license, then there's nothing you can do about it. Ontario government has recognizing licenses pretty much across North America.
Yeah.
If somebody drives up from Mexico, I don't know. Maybe they won't recognize that license. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to ask the question because I have seen American RVs here, and you know, I'm not commenting upon any drivers. I've not seen, you know, I've just seen them on the highway, right? So, all right.
Here you go. This one's cool. Horticultural grants. The provincial government will provide a one-time $1,500 grant to mark the 100th anniversary of horticultural societies. Horticultural societies were extremely important 100 years ago, and still are very, very important. All you have to do is go to the Royal Winter Fair. You'll see. The province says the grant will also be awarded retroactively to horticultural societies that have already reached their 100th anniversary.
Well, good for them.
I think that's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. So, but it's a one-off grant that's going to be provided to such societies, presumably to continue the work that they already do.
I think it's a positive nod, although $1,500 probably won't do the society a whole lot of good. I mean, it will do something, obviously, but it's mostly symbolic.
I think it would do good. I think it would do good. It's a small. It's just an award for recognition of the good work that they've been doing. Yeah,
$1,500 is not going to make a make or break or add huge amounts to their budgets, but it is a recognition. Mike Cushman says, how is it that it takes forever to get a CAT scan? or MRI, well, the professional athlete gets the very night they get hurt. Quite right. We have a stratified system, don't we, Mike? I'm told by Paul Lemire, if you want to get an MRI or a CAT scan, you can arrange to have one within days across in the States, but it takes you months to have one here.
Well, you can pay to get on a list, but yeah, you can pay to get them done quickly. But again, yes, if a member of the Blue Jays goes down today in the game tonight, you can be guaranteed they're going to the hospital, they're going through the system. By tomorrow, they know exactly what the problem is.
Well, they probably have to pay big bucks to get to the top of the line, though. I hope they do.
Yeah, probably do. Yeah.
Well, these are multi-million-dollar players, and the teams have a whole lot of investment in them. So they probably have an arrangement with the hospital saying, we're going to donate X amount of money to your hospital, but you better give us our MRI when we need it. So that accident victims that's on the verge of their life just gets dumped off the table, and the ball player goes on,
Yeah, well, I hope they're not. I hope that isn't the case, but and I'm sure the average ball player doesn't want that either. But yeah. Mike makes a good point. All right. Yeah, so horticultural grants are an interesting thing, that's for sure. All right.
Okay, our time has ended.
We can kind of leave it at the end. Leave it at that point, right?
Yes,
so in a country where healthcare is supposed to be equal, it is not.
No, it isn't.
It is not. I think everybody should be able to get that. I'm not saying that you need an MRI right now, but yeah. But again,
well, it's a matter of privilege. For instance, if you've gave $100,000 to the hospital, or some of those families that have given millions of dollars to the hospital, and they come along and they have a problem, and they're going to knock on the door of the hospital and say, remember me, I give you $5 million. Well, here's my granddaughter. She's sick and I want her put the head of the line. And they'll say, yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 bags full, sir. Because they know that you're going to be a source of money.
See, again, if you've got an MRI or a CAT scan, why shouldn't you be getting an MRI or a CAT scan within a week of needing it? Why should you be, why should you be put in a queue and wait for 18 months? And by the time you get to the CAT scan or MRI, you're kind of, well, why did I need this in the first place?
Well, I have a friend who was told they couldn't get an MRI down here for a few months. So he pulled a few strings and got up to Hamilton, got the MRI right away. And if they had waited for the MRI, Niagara, the NFG down here, his wife would have been dead before the MRI came around.
Yeah. I understand maybe waiting a week or something, but not more than that.
I know. Really, if the United States can have your MRI, you can walk across the U.S. and within a couple of days get an MRI or a CAT scan. You have to pay for it, of course. So why? And they are essential these days for the better healthcare. So why aren't there just clinics that are just made up of MRI and CAT scans, just like a radiologist, clinic?
Yeah.
Why? Where they have a bunch of X-rays.
The weirdest thing is that I got a scan. Don't remember which one it was. I got a scan, but it's like I'm sent to St. Catherine's Hospital at about my appointment time is like 1:45 a.m. So I show up at 1:45 a.m. thinking, who the hell is going to be here? And there's actually a queue of 5 or 6 people.
Yeah, that's how dumb it is. How come we don't have more?
And if they're running these MRIs 24/7, why can't they do them quicker?
I don't know.
And as I say, I don't know what I can't remember what it was, MRI or CAT scan or
I think it's bad planning. I think the whole healthcare system is being planned badly, and right now it's broken.
Yeah,
and
it is broken.
that's it.
Yeah. All right.
So are we done now?
Yeah, I think we're done.
Okay. Without further ado, I bid you adieu, everyone. Don't forget Gaza. Outrage after outrage is still happening there. They've closed it off. No journalists can get in. No journalists can get out. They just will not quit. And there's calls for ceasefire. If Trump really wants, Trump really wants a Nobel Peace Prize, if he solves the Gaza problem, he'll have a crack at it. But I don't think his work in the Congo. I think it's the Congo. Was it the Congo? He's trying to do some peace deals there. Get the belligerents stop fighting. But if he really wants that Nobel Prize, zero in on Gaza.
All right.